Babe, I can't wait for the company party tonight. We can finally show up together in public. This time, I don't have to invent an excuse to leave Jade at home. Jade Adams read those words on her husband's cell phone, and her world came crashing down in seconds. 8 years of marriage. 8 years believing that Clay protected her from company parties out of love. 8 years of being the perfect, smart, and dedicated wife who abandoned her promising career to support his dreams. But in that moment, looking at the message he had sent to Layla, his 24-year-old secretary, a single truth crystallized in Jade's brilliant mind. She wasn't the protected wife. She was the hidden wife. Clay wasn't ashamed of taking her to parties. He was ashamed of her. As she watched from the window of their London penthouse, seeing life go on as usual down below, Jade made a decision that would change everything. If Clay wanted to hide her, she would become impossible to ignore. If he thought he could replace her with a naive young woman, he would discover that he had completely underestimated the woman he married. Revenge, after all, is a dish best served cold. And Jade had all the patience in the world to prepare the perfect feast. At the next company party, the one where Clay would finally introduce Layla as his new partner, he would receive the surprise of his life. Because Jade Adams, the simple woman he was so ashamed to show off, was about to transform into the most powerful force he had ever faced. The game had begun. And this time, Jade would set the rules. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. The discovery. The London sun was relentless on the windows of their penthouse apartment in Shoreditch, but Jade barely noticed the warmth. Her dark eyes, normally bright and expressive, were fixed on the screen of the cell phone, trembling in her delicate hands. The messages she had just discovered on Clay's phone were like stabs to her heart. Babe, I can't wait for the company party tonight. We can finally show up together in public, Layla, her husband's secretary, had sent. Me too, my love. This time I don't have to invent an excuse to leave Jade at home, replied Clay, the man she had shared the last 8 years of her life with. Jade closed her eyes, feeling the world crumble around her. How many times had Clay said that company parties were just business, that it would be tedious for her, that he preferred to protect her from the hostile corporate environment? How many times had she believed him, even feeling special for having such a thoughtful husband? Now it all made sense. The constant work trips, the whispered phone calls, the different perfume on his clothes, the nights he came home too late for any business meeting. Clay wasn't protecting her. He was hiding her. The 29-year-old woman rose slowly from the Italian leather sofa they had chosen together on their honeymoon in Milan. Her bare feet touched the cold marble floor as she walked to the balcony that offered a panoramic view of the city. Down below, life went on as normal. Cars honked, people hurried, street vendors shouted their offers, as if the world hadn't just ended for her. Jade was everything any man could desire. A law graduate from the London School of Economics, with a specialization in corporate law from the University of Barcelona, she had given up a promising career to support Clay's dreams when he decided to expand his import business. Her beauty was natural and striking. Black hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Her fair skin contrasted perfectly with her almond-shaped eyes, and a smile that lit up any room. But more than her appearance, it was her intelligence that had always caught people's attention. Jade possessed an analytical and strategic mind that had helped Clay build his business empire, even if he never publicly acknowledged her contribution. She went through contracts, identified legal loopholes, suggested market expansions, all behind the scenes, always behind the scenes. Now, looking at the London skyline, Jade felt a transformation happening inside her. The pain of betrayal was crystallizing into something different, something more powerful. It wasn't just rage, it was determination, a thirst for justice that made her blood boil and her mind work at maximum speed. She went back inside the apartment and looked at every detail around her. The Frida Kahlo painting she had chosen, the furniture she had lovingly selected, the books in her personal library perfectly organized. This was her home, her life, and Clay had trampled all over it. Her phone vibrated. A message from her best friend, Carmen. "Jade, honey, I saw a picture on Instagram of Clay's company party. You didn't go?" He was with a woman. Jade didn't need to see the picture to know who the woman was. Layla, the blonde 24-year-old Clay had hired 6 months ago as his executive assistant. The same one who always smiled a little too much when Jade visited the office, who made a point of showing intimacy with Clay's personal affairs. But this time would be different. Jade would no longer be the naive wife who stayed home while her husband had fun with his mistress. She had discovered something they didn't imagine she knew. The annual party of the British Importers Association would be next week at the Savoy Hotel. The most important event on Clay's business calendar, where he hoped to close million-pound deals with international investors. A slow, calculated smile spread across Jade's lips. She knew every detail of Clay's business, every client, every supplier, every financial move. After all, who did they think organized all the documents, prepared the presentations, and reviewed the contracts? She was the one truly behind the success of Clay Imports. That night, while Clay worked late, code for being with Layla, Jade locked herself in her personal office. The walls were decorated with her diplomas and certifications, achievements she had set aside to support her husband. Now, they would be her weapons. She opened her laptop and got to work. First, she needed to understand exactly what Clay's strategy would be at the party. She discreetly accessed his corporate email, a password she had known for years, and began to map out every meeting, every presentation, every important person who would be present. Then, she started her own investigation. She called old contacts from college, colleagues from her internship days at law firms, suppliers she knew from the early years of her marriage. Jade was building her own network, preparing the ground for what was to come. The hours went by unnoticed as she worked. When Clay finally got home at 3 a.m, he found his wife sleeping peacefully in bed. He had no idea she had spent the entire night plotting. In the following days, Jade maintained her normal routine. She prepared Clay's breakfast, asked about his day, and feigned interest in his stories about important meetings. But inside, she was preparing like a chess player, planning dozens of moves ahead. She knew that revenge was a dish best served cold, and she had all the patience in the world. Clay and Layla had underestimated the wrong woman. Soon, they would discover that Jade wasn't just a trophy wife. She was a force of nature. When the night of the party arrived, Clay's world would fall apart, and Jade would be there to see every second of his humiliation. The first move of the game had begun, and she already had several moves of an advantage. What would you do if you discovered a betrayal like this? Confront him immediately or plot your revenge? Leave your opinion in the comments below. The plan. A week had passed since the devastating discovery, and Jade had completely transformed. On the outside, she maintained the same routine as always. She woke up early, prepared coffee, and saw Clay off with a kiss on the cheek. But inside, a war machine was operating at full capacity. On that Tuesday morning, while Clay was in the shower humming a song, probably thinking about Layla, Jade was in her private office, finalizing the last details of her plan. She had spent entire nights studying her husband's every move, every behavioral pattern, and every weakness she could exploit. Her first move had been brilliant in its simplicity. Jade had sought out Helen Vasquez, London's most renowned corporate event organizer. Helen was known for her impeccable contacts and absolute discretion. Exactly what Jade needed. "Mrs. Adams," Helen had said during their meeting at a discreet cafe in Notting Hill, "I understand your situation perfectly. Many women go through what you're going through, and yes, I can help you." The plan was elegant. Helen would get Jade a VIP invitation to the British Importers Association party, not as Clay's wife, but as a representative of a fictitious group of European investors interested in the Latin American market. The identity would be built with flawless documents, something Helen had already done for other clients in similar situations. But Jade wouldn't stop there. She had discovered something that made everything even more delicious. Ricardo Mendoza, Clay's biggest rival in the import sector, would be at the party. Ricardo was a 55-year-old man, elegant and extremely successful, who had always shown a discreet interest in Jade at the few social events they had attended together in the past. Over the last few days, Jade had casually run into Ricardo at a few strategic locations in the city. First at Starbucks, where she forgot to bring money, and he graciously paid for her coffee. Then at the Tate Modern, where they had a fascinating conversation about the exhibition of contemporary artists. Ricardo was intelligent, cultured, and clearly attracted to her. "You have a unique perspective on art, Jade," he had commented, while they observed a work by Gabriel Orozco. "It's a shame Clay doesn't share your cultural interests." Ricardo's words had planted a seed. He knew Clay well enough to know that Jade's husband didn't value her intelligence and sophistication. And now, that information would be crucial for the next steps of the plan. That afternoon, Jade received the call she was waiting for. It was Carmen, her best friend, who worked as a society journalist for one of London's most important magazines. "Jade, I got the information you asked for," Carmen said in a low voice. "Leila Herrera, 24 years old, a business graduate from the University of London. She's been working at Clay's company for 6 months. And yes, she will be at the party as his official guest." "Official," Jade repeated, feeling a pang of pain that quickly turned into fuel for her determination. "Yes, honey. From what I found out, Clay registered her as his business partner for the event. Apparently, he's planning to introduce her to the international investors." Jade's blood boiled. Clay wasn't just cheating on her gear. He was replacing her publicly, introducing Leila as if she were a fundamental part of his business, when the one who had truly built everything with him had been Jade. But this information only solidified her resolve. If Clay wanted to play this way, she would play better. That night, after Clay left for one of his late meetings, Jade put the second phase of her plan into action. She called Miguel Santos, one of London's most respected corporate lawyers. Miguel had been her professor at the university and had kept in touch over the years. "Jade, what a surprise to hear your voice," Miguel had said, genuinely happy. "How are things? I still regret you left law. You were one of the brightest minds in your class." "Miguel, I need your help with something delicate," Jade had replied. "Could you meet me tomorrow? It's about a rather complex business matter." The meeting was scheduled for the next day at Miguel's elegant office in the West End. When Jade arrived, wearing an impeccable black suit that accentuated her elegant figure and natural authority, Miguel couldn't hide his admiration. "You're radiant, Jade. What can I do for you?" Jade explained her situation with the coldness of an experienced negotiator. She didn't mention the betrayal. That would be irrelevant to the legal aspects. Instead, she focused on the facts. She wanted to understand her rights as a spouse regarding the family business, especially considering her unrecognized contribution to the company's growth. "Interesting," Miguel murmured as he took notes. "Do you have documentation of those contributions?" Jade smiled. For 8 years, she had meticulously kept copies of all the contracts she had reviewed, all the market analyses she had prepared, and all the strategies she had developed. Clay had never known about this organization. He assumed she just helped a little and then forgot everything. "I have everything documented, Miguel. Every email, every file, every contribution. Clay never imagined I kept such detailed records." Miguel's eyes lit up with professional interest. "Jade, this is pure gold. With this documentation, we can prove a substantial intellectual contribution to the business. If something were to happen to your marriage, something may be about to happen," Jade interrupted softly. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Clay was at an intimate restaurant with Layla, planning how to introduce her at the party next week. They had no idea that their every move was being carefully watched and cataloged by Jade. "Babe, you'll see how wonderful it will be," Layla whispered, playing with her blonde hair. "We can finally be a real couple in public." "Yes, my love," Clay replied, holding her hand across the table. "After the party, I'm going to talk to Jade about a divorce. I can't live this lie anymore." If they had known that Jade had already discovered everything and was orchestrating their public destruction, they might not have been smiling with such confidence. The next morning, Jade woke up with a sense of power she hadn't felt in a long time. Today would be the day to begin the final phase of her plan. She put on a navy blue dress that brought out her eyes, applied flawless makeup, and tied her hair back in an elegant bun. When Clay came down for coffee, he found his wife more beautiful than ever. "You look beautiful today, Jade," he commented, but there was something distracted in his voice. His mind was clearly somewhere else, or rather, with someone else. "Thank you, darling," she replied with a serene smile. "I have an important meeting today." "A meeting?" Clay seemed surprised. It had been months since Jade had mentioned any professional commitments. "Yes, I'm thinking of going back to work. Maybe it's time to resume my career." Clay almost choked on his coffee. The idea of Jade returning to the job market clearly bothered him. An independent wife would be an obstacle to his plans with Layla. "But darling, there's no need. I take care of everything. You know that." "I know, love," Jade replied, kissing his forehead. "But a woman needs to feel useful, don't you think?" After Clay left for work, Jade allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. In a few days, at the most important party of her husband's career, she would emerge as the hurricane he never saw coming. The revenge was taking shape and would be sweeter than she ever imagined. Do you think Clay and Layla deserve what's about to happen to them? The gala only 3 days remained until the British Importers Association party, and Jade was finalizing the last details of her transformation. She had spent the morning at one of London's most exclusive salons, where a team of professionals worked to enhance her natural beauty to a level that was breathtaking. Her dark hair now fell in perfect waves that framed her face in a cinematic way. The makeup, applied by an artist who worked with celebrities, highlighted her almond eyes in a way that was both elegant and hypnotic. Her nails, painted in a shade of red that symbolized power, completed the transformation. But the real change wasn't physical. It was internal. Jade had regained the confidence she had abandoned during the years of her marriage. Now, when she looked in the mirror, she saw the brilliant and determined woman she had been before meeting Clay again. Her first stop after the salon was at Paloma Herrera's boutique, one of Mexico's most renowned designers. Jade had scheduled a private meeting to choose the dress she would wear to the party, a piece that needed to communicate power, elegance, and a very clear message that she was no longer the submissive wife everyone knew. "Mrs. Adams," Paloma greeted her with a genuine smile. "It's a pleasure to see you again. I heard you were looking for something special." "Very special," Jade confirmed. "I need a dress that makes an unforgettable entrance." Paloma, who had dressed first ladies and international stars, immediately understood the mission. "I have exactly what you need." The dress was a masterpiece, an exclusive model in emerald green Italian silk that contrasted perfectly with Jade's skin. The cut was impeccable, elegant enough for the corporate environment, but with a touch of sensuality that would ensure all eyes turned to her. The piece cost the equivalent of 3 employees' monthly salaries, but Jade didn't hesitate. After all, she had helped build the fortune she would now use for her revenge. "It's perfect," she murmured, observing herself in the mirror. Absolutely perfect. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Clay was in his office trying to concentrate on work, but his mind was completely occupied with thoughts of Layla. He had spent the morning on WhatsApp with her, planning every detail of how they would present themselves at the party. "Babe, I bought a light pink dress for the party," Layla had written. "Do you think it looks good on me?" "You look beautiful in any color, my love," Clay had replied. "I can't wait to introduce you to everyone as my partner." What Clay didn't know was that Jade had access to all these conversations. Over the past few days, she had discreetly installed monitoring software on his phone, a skill she had developed during her digital law studies. Every message, every plan, every move they made was known to her before it even happened. That afternoon, Jade had her last meeting with Helen Vasquez to finalize the details of her fake identity for the party. Helen had created a perfect character. Jade would be introduced as Jade Montenegro, a representative of a consortium of European investors interested in expanding business in Latin America. "All the documents are ready," Helen explained, handing her an elegant folder. "Your business card, credentials of the fictitious company, even a professional website we created. You will be one of the most important people at the party. And the contacts you mentioned? Ah, yes. Ricardo Mendoza has already confirmed his presence, and I discreetly let slip that a very interesting female investor would be there. He showed immediate curiosity. I also spoke with a few economic journalists. They will be there to cover the main businesses, but they are always interested in new and beautiful faces." Jade smiled. Everything was falling perfectly into place. That night, during dinner, Jade watched Clay carefully. He was visibly nervous, constantly checking his phone and seeming distant. Clearly, the proximity of the party and the prospect of finally going public with his relationship with Layla made him anxious. "You seem worried, darling," Jade commented casually, delicately cutting the salmon on her plate. "Oh, it's just work. You know how these corporate parties are. A lot of stress, a lot of important business." "I imagine so. Are you going alone?" For a brief moment, Clay hesitated. Jade could see the internal conflict reflected in his eyes. Part of him wanted to tell the truth, to get rid of the lie. But another part still didn't have the courage. "Yes, it's alone. You know you don't like those things." "True," Jade agreed, taking a sip of wine. "But sometimes I wonder if I shouldn't force myself to participate more in your professional life. After all, we're a team, aren't we?" The irony in her voice went completely unnoticed by Clay, who was too busy answering a message from Layla under the table. Later that night, after Clay fell asleep, Jade locked herself in her office to do the final checks of her plan. She had created a detailed timeline of how everything would happen at the party. 7:30 p.m. Clay and Layla's arrival at the event. Oripum, Jade's arrival as Jade Montenegro. 8:15 p.m. First strategic contact with Ricardo Mendoza. 8:30 p.m. Gradual approach to the business circles where Clay would be. 900 p.m. The moment of revelation. Every minute was planned with military precision. Jade knew exactly where Clay would be at every moment, who he would talk to, and what deals he would try to close. After all, she had organized his agenda for years. Jade's phone vibrated. It was a message from Carmen. "Honey, I got more information. Layla is telling all her friends that she's going to debut as Clay's official girlfriend at the party. She even posted a picture on Instagram stories trying on dresses with the caption, 'Special night coming.'" Jade sighed. Layla's naivety was almost touching. The young woman truly believed that Clay would leave Jade for her without consequences, that she could simply assume the position of wife without facing any resistance. She was about to discover that she had completely underestimated the woman she was trying to replace. The next morning, Jade woke up with a sense of absolute calm. It was as if all the anxiety, all the pain, and all the uncertainty of the past few days had crystallized into a cold, calculated determination. She prepared Clay's breakfast for the last time as a deceived wife. Starting tomorrow, everything would be different. When he came down, he found her more radiant than ever. "Good morning, love," she said, serving him coffee exactly as he liked it. "Good morning. You look very beautiful today." "Thank you. By the way, tomorrow night I'm going out with Carmen. Dinner and a movie. You don't mind, do you?" "Of course not. Have fun." Clay could barely hide his relief. If Jade was busy with her friend, he wouldn't need to invent any more excuses for coming home late after the party with Layla. After he left, Jade allowed herself a smile of satisfaction. Tomorrow night, Clay would discover that he had completely underestimated the woman he married. And Layla would learn that some positions in life are not won with just youth and naivety. The revenge was in its final 24 hours of preparation, and it would be devastatingly perfect. Like this video if you're on Jade's side. The Showdown. The event hall at the Savoy Hotel had never hosted an event as important as the annual British Importers Association party. The main hall was decorated with exotic flowers, Czech crystal chandeliers, and a panoramic view of the city that took your breath away. The most influential guests in the British business sector circulated between glasses of French champagne and canapés prepared by the hotel's executive chef. At exactly 7:30 p.m., Clay arrived at the event with Layla on his arm. She was stunning in a light pink dress that enhanced her youth, her blonde hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Clay, impeccable in his black tuxedo, smiled with the confidence of a man who could finally publicly display his conquest. "Are you nervous, my love?" he whispered in Layla's ear as they handed their invitations at the reception. "A little," she admitted, squeezing his arm. "But I'm happy. I can finally be by your side as your true woman." Clay smiled and delicately kissed her hand. "Today is our first official day as a couple, the first of many." They were received with enthusiasm by the other business people. Clay introduced Layla as his new business partner and strategic consultant, titles that made the young woman smile with pride. She didn't notice the curious and slightly malicious glances from some of the wives present, experienced women who immediately recognized the dynamic of the situation. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, Jade was making the final touches to her preparation. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror of her closet and barely recognized the woman staring back. The Paloma Herrera emerald green dress had transformed her into a modern goddess, elegant, powerful, and absolutely stunning. Her hair was pulled back into a sophisticated low bun, with a few strategically loose strands framing her face. The makeup was impeccable, her eyes highlighted with a perfect winged eyeliner, her lips in a nude tone that emphasized the natural beauty of her mouth. Her jewelry was discreet, but extremely expensive. Diamond earrings that had been a gift from Clay on their 3rd wedding anniversary, and a pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. "Perfect," she murmured to herself, adjusting the dress one last time. "It's time to show them who I really am." At 7:45 p.m., Jade got into the back of the Mercedes-Benz that Helen had rented for the occasion. The driver, discreetly instructed on the importance of punctuality, navigated the London streets with the precision of a professional pilot. During the ride, Jade mentally reviewed every detail of her plan. She knew exactly where Clay would be at 8:15 p.m. At the main bar, talking with representatives from the Japanese company Tanaka Industries, a deal he had been trying to close for months. She also knew that Layla would probably be by his side, smiling and nodding occasionally, clearly out of her element in the technical discussions about international logistics and customs regulations. At 8:10 p.m., the Mercedes stopped in front of the Savoy. Jade took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and got out of the car with the grace of a queen. The doorman, impressed with her elegance, practically stumbled as he opened the door for her. "Good evening, madam," he stammered. "Welcome to the Savoy." "Thank you," Jade replied with a smile that was both gentle and powerful. She entered the hotel and headed to the elevator that would take her to the party hall. In the elevator mirror, she made one last adjustment to her lipstick and allowed herself a smile of anticipation. In a few minutes, the most important show of her life would begin. The elevator doors opened on the party floor, and Jade made her entrance. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. People whispered, questioning who the stunning woman who had just arrived was. Helen, strategically positioned near the entrance, approached immediately. "Jade Montenegro," she said, loud enough for nearby people to hear. "What a pleasure to see you. How was the flight from Barcelona?" "Excellent, thank you," Jade replied in perfect English, but with a slight accent that Helen had suggested to make the identity more convincing. "I'm very excited to meet the British businessmen. I've heard wonderful things about the local market." Meanwhile, on the other side of the hall, Clay was exactly where Jade had predicted, chatting animatedly with the Tanaka Industries executives. Layla was by his side, smiling and nodding occasionally, clearly out of her element in the technical discussions about international logistics and customs regulations. "Mr. Martin," Hiroshi Tanaka, the regional director, was saying, "we are impressed with your proposal, but we need guarantees about your company's ability to handle larger volumes." "Absolutely, Mr. Tanaka," Clay replied with confidence. "Our infrastructure has recently been expanded, and we have strategic partnerships that allow us to—" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes had caught a movement from the other side of the hall, a woman in a green dress who was drawing the attention of everyone around her. There was something familiar about her, something that made his heart beat faster in a way he couldn't explain. "Excuse me for a moment," he murmured, handing his card to Tanaka. "Layla, continue the conversation. I'll be right back." Layla, confused but obedient, tried to maintain a smile as Clay walked away, clearly distracted by something or someone. On the other side of the hall, Jade had been introduced to Ricardo Mendoza, exactly as planned. The businessman, elegant in his impeccable tuxedo, couldn't hide his admiration for the mysterious European investor. "Miss Montenegro," Ricardo said, delicately kissing her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Helen told me you represent a consortium interested in expanding into Latin America." "That's right, Mr. Mendoza. We are always looking for partnerships with visionary entrepreneurs," Jade replied, her eyes sparkling with an intelligence that fascinated Ricardo. "I've heard great things about your company. Perhaps we can talk about collaboration opportunities." "That would be an honor. Allow me to introduce you to some colleagues in the sector." As Ricardo guided her through the hall, Jade kept a part of her attention focused on Clay. She could see him approaching slowly, clearly intrigued by her presence. The plan was working perfectly. "Ricardo," she said softly, "isn't that Clay Martin from Clay Imports over there? I've heard a lot about his company." "Ah, yes. Clay is a competitor," Ricardo replied with a slightly ironic smile. "A competent businessman, I must admit, although his methods are sometimes questionable." "How so?" "Well, we recently discovered that he has been using privileged information obtained through, let's say, unconventional sources. Nothing illegal, mind you, but ethically dubious." Jade feigned surprise, although she knew exactly what Ricardo was referring to. It was one of the strategies she herself had developed for Clay years ago, using personal contacts to get information about bids before they went public. At the time, it seemed smart. Now, it would be another weapon in her arsenal. At that moment, Clay finally got close enough to see the mysterious woman's face clearly. When his eyes met hers, his world stopped. It was Jade, his wife. But it wasn't the Jade he knew. This woman radiated power, confidence, a sophisticated sensuality he had never seen in her. For a moment, he was paralyzed, unable to process how his submissive and home-loving wife had transformed into this goddess who commanded the attention of the entire hall. "Jade," he whispered in disbelief, taking a step forward. "Excuse me," she replied, feigning confusion with an Oscar-worthy performance. "I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm Jade Montenegro, a representative of the Barcelona Investment Consortium." Ricardo watched the interaction with growing interest. "You know each other?" She, Clay stammered, completely baffled. "Sorry, she looks a lot like someone I know." Jade smiled with a calculated coolness. "Oh, how interesting. You must be Clay Martin, from Clay Imports. I've heard a lot about your company. Ricardo here was telling me about the innovative methods you use." The word innovative carried a tone that made Clay shiver. There was something in those eyes, his wife's eyes, that warned him something was terribly wrong. "Jade, what are you doing here?" he whispered, low enough for only her to hear. "I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, but you keep confusing me with someone. Perhaps we should focus on business. I heard you were trying to close a contract with Tanaka Industries." Clay's blood ran cold. How did she know about the deal with the Japanese? It was confidential information he had only shared with one person. His eyes went back to Layla, who was still on the other side of the hall, trying to keep a conversation going with the Japanese executives. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. Jade knew. Somehow, his wife had discovered everything. "Ricardo," Jade continued, her voice soft as silk but sharp as a blade. "You mentioned something about questionable methods. Could you elaborate? As an investor, I need to fully understand the ethical standards of the companies we consider doing business with." Ricardo, delighted with the opportunity to annoy his competitor in front of a potential investor, smiled. "Well, there are rumors that Clay Imports obtains information about bids through, shall we say, intimate relationships with employees of public companies." Jade feigned shock. "Intimate relationships? What kind of relationships?" "The kind that can compromise the impartiality of certain business decisions," Ricardo replied, looking directly at Clay. Clay was turning pale. He didn't know where Ricardo had gotten that information, but it was dangerously close to the truth, and, worse, he was being exposed in front of his own wife, who for some devilish reason was pretending to be a foreign investor. At that moment, Layla approached, clearly confused by Clay's long disappearance. "Babe, the Japanese are asking where you went. They want to finalize the contract details." The silence that followed was deafening. Layla had just called Clay Babe in front of Ricardo Mendoza and the mysterious investor. Worse, she hadn't realized that the investor was, in fact, her lover's wife. Ricardo raised an eyebrow, clearly understanding the situation. Jade maintained an expression of mild confusion, as if she didn't fully comprehend the personal dynamics she was witnessing. "Your secretary?" Jade asked Clay innocently. She... Clay was completely lost. How to explain Layla without exposing the affair? How to maintain the professional facade when his personal life was imploding in public? "Actually," Layla said, with a naive confidence that made Jade feel a mix of pity and irritation. "I'm Clay's business partner and also, well, we're a couple." Well, the words echoed through the group like a bomb. Ricardo couldn't hide a satisfied smile. He finally had concrete evidence that Clay was using personal relationships to advance his business. And Jade smiled. It wasn't a gentle or understanding smile. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. "How interesting," she said, her voice maintaining its soft tone, but carrying a coldness that made Clay shiver. "And his wife? Does she know about this partnership?" Comment your thoughts on the final outcome, the final triumph. The 5 seconds of silence that followed Jade's question seemed like an eternity. Clay was frozen, his hands trembling slightly as he processed the magnitude of what was happening. Layla, still unaware of the investor's true identity, smiled with the naivety of someone who believed she had finally won her place in the sun. His wife? Layla laughed, a crystalline sound that cut through the air like a funeral bell. Oh, Miss Montenegro, that's a complicated story. Clay is in the process of separating from his wife. She's a very simple woman. She doesn't understand anything about business, you know. She stays home, has no ambitions. She's not like us, modern and independent women. Every word of Layla's was like a stab to Clay's heart, who watched in horror as his mistress destroyed any chance of getting out of this situation with dignity. Ricardo watched everything with the interest of someone who was witnessing the collapse of his biggest competitor. And Jade maintained her icy smile, preparing for the final blow. What an interesting perspective, Jade said softly. And tell me, Miss... I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Layla Herrera, the young woman replied with pride. I graduated in business from the University of London and have been working as a strategic consultant for Clay Imports for a few months. Strategic consultant, Jade repeated, savoring each word. What impressive responsibilities for someone so young. Tell me, what kind of strategies have you developed for the company? Layla blushed, clearly unsure how to answer. Her role in the company was basically decorative. She organized Clay's schedule, answered phone calls, and occasionally typed up reports that other people prepared. Well, I help with the general organization of operations. General organization, Jade murmured, pretending to take mental notes. And the market analyses, the feasibility studies, the international contract negotiations? Layla's silence was more eloquent than any answer. Ricardo began to laugh discreetly, finally understanding that he was watching a slow-motion massacre. You know, Jade continued, her voice gaining a dangerous edge. It's interesting how family businesses work. Many times, the true strategist behind the success is someone who works behind the scenes, without public recognition. Clay closed his eyes, knowing exactly where she was going. For example, Jade continued, discreetly taking some documents from her handbag. I was reviewing some materials on Clay Imports before our possible partnership, and discovered something fascinating. Most of the company's expansion strategies, the most innovative market analyses, and even the most lucrative contracts, all seem to have been developed by someone with advanced legal training, someone with a specialization in international business law. Ricardo leaned forward, intrigued. Clay tried to interrupt, but Jade continued relentlessly. But here's the interesting part. Officially, Clay Imports has never employed a full-time corporate lawyer. So, who developed these brilliant strategies? She made a theatrical pause, allowing the question to hang in the air. Unless, she continued, a devilish smile playing on her lips. The true strategist was someone very close to Mr. Martin. Someone with intimate access to all the company's information. Someone who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, without ever receiving public credit. At that moment, several people around them began to pay attention to the conversation. Jade's voice, though soft, carried an authority that naturally attracted listeners. Are you referring to someone specific? Ricardo asked, clearly fascinated. I am referring, Jade said, her voice now filled with a coldness that made Clay shiver, to Clay Martin's wife, Jade Adams, a woman with a law degree from the London School of Economics, with a specialization in corporate law from the University of Barcelona. A woman who abandoned a promising career to support her husband's dreams. A woman who spent 8 years developing every strategy, reviewing every contract, and analyzing every market opportunity that transformed Clay Imports from a small family business into an import empire. The silence around them was absolute. People had moved closer, drawn by the palpable tension of the situation. Clay was as pale as a ghost, finally understanding the magnitude of what his wife had discovered and prepared. But you know what's most interesting? Jade continued, now addressing Layla directly, who was beginning to look uncomfortable. "It's that this simple woman who doesn't understand business is, in fact, the real architect of the success you now claim as your own." Layla looked nervously at Clay, seeking support, but he was petrified. Finally, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in the young woman's mind. "Miss Montenegro," Clay finally managed to whisper, "can we talk in private?" "Sorry, Mr. Martin, but I don't believe we have anything to discuss in private. As a potential investor, all my questions must be asked transparently." At that moment, Helen approached the group, followed by two elegant men that Jade recognized from her preparations. Journalists from The Economist, London's most important business publication. "Jade," Helen said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Thomas Restrepo and Mr. Carlos Vega from The Economist. They're doing a special report on international investors in the UK." The journalists greeted Jade respectfully, clearly impressed with her presence and articulation. "Miss Montenegro, it's a pleasure to meet you. Could we ask you some questions about your investment plans in the country?" "Of course," Jade replied gracefully. "But I was just discussing some ethical concerns about certain local companies with Mr. Mendoza." "Ethical concerns?" Thomas Restrepo asked, immediately interested. As an investigative journalist, he had a sharp nose for scandals. Ricardo, relishing the opportunity to expose his competitor, wasted no time. "We were discussing questionable practices of some companies in the sector, the use of privileged information, inappropriate personal relationships to gain competitive advantages, and," Jade added her voice, cutting through the air like a sword, "the misappropriation of intellectual property." The words dropped like a bomb. Clay finally understood there was no escape. His wife hadn't just discovered the affair. She had prepared his complete and public destruction. "Intellectual property?" Carlos Vega asked, his journalistic antennae fully active. "Yes," Jade replied, taking more documents from her bag. "I have evidence here that certain companies have systematically appropriated the intellectual work of unrecognized collaborators, specifically spouses, who contributed significantly to the development of business strategies without receiving proper credit or compensation." She handed the documents to the journalists. "These are contracts, market analyses, and expansion strategies, all developed by an uncredited source, but which were publicly presented as original work by the company's management." Clay tried to intervene. "Those documents are private. You can't—" "Actually," Jade interrupted him, her Jade Montenegro mask finally falling. "I can, because all these documents were developed by me, Jade Adams, your wife, the woman you just allowed your mistress to call simple and unambitious." The impact of the revelation was seismic. Layla turned as white as paper, finally understanding that she had spent the last few minutes insulting the wife of the man she loved, a wife who now revealed herself to be much more formidable than she ever imagined. The journalists began taking photos and notes frantically. Ricardo laughed openly, delighted with the spectacle. "And Clay?" Clay collapsed into a nearby chair, finally understanding that he had lost everything. "Gentlemen of the press," Jade continued, now speaking with the authority of an experienced executive, "I have a proposal. How about an exclusive interview about female intellectual property in the business world? I have a fascinating story about how talented women are systematically erased from the successes they help build." "That would be fantastic," Thomas Restrepo responded immediately. "Can we schedule it for tomorrow?" "Perfect. And I assume you would also like to investigate the ethical practices of Clay Imports? I have extensive documentation on questionable methods of obtaining contracts." While the journalists made appointments, and Ricardo offered additional information about his competitor's dubious practices, Layla finally found the courage to speak. You're really his wife?" Jade turned to her with a look that mixed pity and contempt. "I am. Or rather, I was. Because after tonight, I believe our marriage has definitely come to an end. I didn't know you were smart, capable, powerful. No, darling. You believed the version Clay presented of me, the simple wife who stays home doing nothing. Did you ever wonder how a mediocre man like Clay managed to build a business empire all by himself? Layla couldn't respond. Tears began to stream down her face as the magnitude of her naivety became clear. Jade turned to Clay, who remained silent, destroyed. As for you, my dear ex-husband, I hope you enjoyed your last party as the owner of Clay Imports. Because starting tomorrow, when my lawyers file for divorce, you will find out exactly what percentage of the company legally belongs to me. She paused, allowing the words to sink in. You see, for 8 years, I meticulously documented every contribution I made to the company, every strategy, every analysis, every contract. And according to the law, spouses are entitled to compensation for intellectual contributions to family businesses. Clay's face lost all remaining color. By the way, Jade continued with a smile that was pure venom, Ricardo, I believe we discussed a possible partnership between your company and my future independent venture. That would be an honor, Jade, Ricardo replied, kissing her hand with genuine admiration. A woman with your intelligence and experience would be a valuable partner. Jade turned one last time to Clay and Layla. Revenge, she said softly, is truly a dish best served cold, and you two have just been served. With that, she took Ricardo's arm and walked away, leaving behind the wreckage of the life she had built with Clay and Layla's naive dreams. Behind her, she could hear the sound of cameras photographing the destroyed couple and the voices of journalists asking increasingly aggressive questions. Jade Adams had died that night. In her place, a stronger, smarter, and definitely more dangerous woman was born. And her empire was just beginning. The party continued around them, but for Clay and Layla, the music had stopped forever. 6 months later, the morning sun bathed the executive office on the top floor of the Shard, one of London's most prestigious buildings. Jade Montenegro, the name Jade had adopted professionally after the divorce, delicately adjusted her porcelain cup as she reviewed the financial reports of her new company. Montenegro, Strategic Consulting. 6 months. Only 6 months had passed since that transformative night at the Savoy, and Jade had built an empire that rivaled anything Clay had ever dreamed of achieving. The secretary's phone rang in the office next door. Ms. Montenegro, Mr. Ricardo Mendoza is here for the 10 o'clock meeting, announced Sophia, her executive assistant, an experienced and efficient 40-year-old woman, very different from the decorative secretaries other executives preferred. You can send him in, Sophia. And please, ask her to cancel my schedule after lunch. Ricardo has an interview for CNN International at 2 in the afternoon. Jade smiled as she remembered how she got here. The public humiliation of Clay that night had been just the first move of a much more complex and satisfying chess game. Ricardo entered the office, elegant as always, but now there was something in his eyes that Jade recognized perfectly. Genuine admiration and a touch of reverence. He was no longer the powerful businessman courting a potential investor. He was an equal partner recognizing an equal. Good morning, Jade, he said, delicately kissing her hand. The third quarter numbers are impressive. Our joint venture has exceeded all projections. Good morning, Ricardo. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss about the expansion into Colombia. As he settled into the Italian leather armchair, a piece of furniture she had chosen herself to match the minimalist and powerful decor of her office, Jade allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The joint venture between Montenegro Strategic and Ricardo's companies had become one of the most profitable partnerships in the British international trade sector. But the real pleasure didn't just come from the financial success. It came from the poetic justice of her rise being built on the rubble of Clay's arrogance. "Before we begin," Ricardo said, taking a magazine from his executive briefcase, "did you see the cover of The Economist this week?" Jade smiled. "How could I not have seen it?" Her photo occupied the entire cover of London's most important business magazine, accompanied by the headline, "Jade Montenegro, the strategic mind that revolutionized UK international trade." The 8-page story told the official tale of her career. A brilliant lawyer specializing in international business law who had decided to start her own company after years of working discreetly as a consultant. The article highlighted her impeccable education, her innovative strategic vision, and her almost supernatural ability to identify market opportunities before competitors. Of course, the article didn't mention Clay directly. It didn't need to. Anyone in the British business sector knew exactly where the experience and knowledge that now made Jade Montenegro one of the most sought-after consultants in the country came from. "It's an excellent article," Jade commented modestly, "although I think it exaggerated a little in some aspects." "Exaggerated?" Ricardo laughed. "Jade, in 6 months you have built a company that already bills more per quarter than some traditional companies bill per year, transformed 3 family companies into market leaders, and developed international expansion strategies that are being studied at universities. If there is exaggeration, it's out of modesty." It was true. After that fateful night, Jade had channeled all her suppressed energy and intelligence into building something genuinely her own. Every client she won, every successful strategy she implemented, and every million-pound contract she closed was a silent declaration of her true worth. And the clients came in droves. Businessmen who had known her work behind the scenes at Clay Imports could finally hire the mind behind the strategies they so admired directly. International executives who had been impressed by market analyses developed by Clay's team discovered that they could work directly with the true author. Jade's phone vibrated discreetly. A message from Carmen, her best friend, and now the director of communications for her company. "Honey, you need to see this. I just got a call from Forbes UK. They want to include you on the list of the 30 most influential businesswomen in the country. And there's more. CNN UK wants to do a documentary about women who have turned personal failures into spectacular business successes." Jade typed quickly. "Schedule the interviews. And Carmen, thank you for always being by my side." "Is it good news?" Ricardo asked, noticing her smile. "There's always good news when you control your own narrative," Jade replied philosophically. "But let's talk business. How are the negotiations with the Colombian group?" While they discussed expansion details and market strategies, Jade couldn't help but have a flashback to those dark days 6 months ago when she discovered the betrayal and felt as if her world had collapsed. What a naive woman she had been, thinking that her life depended on Clay. What a terrible mistake she had made by diminishing her own dreams to support his. What precious time she had lost, being the perfect wife for a man who didn't even value her enough to introduce her publicly. But maybe all of that had been necessary. Maybe she needed to go through that humiliation to rediscover her own strength. Maybe she needed to be underestimated to learn to never underestimate herself again. The intercom interrupted her thoughts. "Ms. Montenegro, Miss Helen Vasquez is online too. She says it's about the launch event for your foundation." "Thanks, Sophia. Tell her I'll call her back in an hour." Ah, the foundation. That had been another project born from that traumatic night. The Jade Montenegro Foundation for Female Entrepreneurship had already helped more than 200 women launch their own businesses. The focus was specific: women who had sacrificed their careers for marriages or relationships and now wanted to rebuild their professional lives. Every story that reached the foundation echoed her own experience. Lawyers who became housewives, engineers who abandoned projects to support husbands, and doctors who paused specialties to raise children, and then discovered that their husbands had moved on to younger companions. Jade had turned her pain into purpose, her humiliation into strength for other women, and nothing satisfied her more than receiving calls from businesswomen who had rebuilt their lives with the help of the foundation. "Jade," Ricardo said, interrupting her thoughts. "Can I ask a personal question?" "Of course. Do you have any news of him? Your ex-husband?" Jade paused, considering the question. Yes, she had news. How could she not? In the business city of London, circles were small, and gossip traveled quickly. Clay had tried to save his company after the scandal, but the combination of media exposure, the loss of important contracts, and the divorce lawsuit, where Jade had legally proven her intellectual contribution to the business, had been devastating. Clay Imports was forced to declare bankruptcy 3 months after that fateful night. He now worked as a sales manager at a mid-sized company, a position that represented a dramatic fall from his former status as a successful businessman. People in the sector knew his story. They knew that the empire he had built had actually been built by his ex-wife. They knew he had traded a brilliant partner for a youthful fling, and Layla. Poor Layla had learned in the cruelest way possible that being the other woman rarely ends well. Clay, desperate and humiliated, had taken out his frustrations on the young woman he considered responsible for his downfall. The relationship ended in just 6 weeks, leaving Layla unemployed, disgraced, and with a ruined professional reputation. She currently worked at a small accounting firm in the city's suburbs, far from the glamorous world she thought she had conquered. "I have some information," Jade replied carefully, "but I prefer to focus on the present and the future. The past has already served its purpose." Ricardo nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in her words. "You are an extraordinary woman, Jade. To turn betrayal into triumph and humiliation into an empire is not something everyone can do. Any woman has that strength within her, Ricardo. Sometimes we just need an extreme situation to discover it." The phone rang again. It was Sophia, informing her that the executives of the German company Hoffman Industries had arrived for the meeting about European expansion. Jade stood up, adjusting the blazer of a tailored suit that cost more than the monthly salary Clay now earned. Her Louboutin heels Chitrios echoed on the marble as she headed to the door. "Ricardo, let's welcome our German guests. I have a proposal that will revolutionize our presence in the European market." As they walked down the corridor toward the main meeting room, Jade passed in front of the full-length mirror that decorated the wall. The woman who stared back at her was unrecognizable from the submissive and naive wife of 6 months ago. This Jade radiated confidence, power, and success. Her eyes shone with the sharp intelligence of someone who had learned to never underestimate her own worth again. Her smile carried the serenity of someone who had turned her greatest defeat into her greatest victory. She was no longer the wife Clay was ashamed to present. She was the woman he could never win back. And contrary to what many people expected, Jade felt no bitterness or desire for additional revenge. That night at the Savoy had been enough. Clay and Layla had received exactly the consequences that their choices deserved. Now, Jade was too busy building her own legacy to waste time looking back. As she entered the meeting room, where German businessmen rose respectfully to greet her, Jade Montenegro smiled. Not a smile of revenge or superiority, but a smile of genuine satisfaction. She had proved something much more important than her ability to take revenge. She had proved her capacity for rebirth, and that, after all, was the sweetest triumph of all. The meeting began, and Jade Montenegro, formerly Jade Adams, the hidden ex-wife, took her place at the head of the table as the CEO of one of the most respected consulting firms in London. The future had never looked so bright. The silent secret of Madison. Hello everyone. Before we begin, please give this video a big like and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories. And now, get ready for a story that will grab you from the first second. She could barely breathe as she signed the divorce papers. 6 years later, she sent her ex something that left him on the verge of panic. Why did a simple signature and a shredded piece of paper hide such a devastating secret? And what could she have sent him that would make him fear for his very life? The high-pitched hum of the air conditioner in the law office was a monotonous sound that seemed to mock the inner chaos of Isabella Miller. The pen, heavy as an anchor, finally came to rest on the polished mahogany desk, leaving the signature that crumbled an entire life. Her thin, pale fingers trembled, a tremor that was born in her soul and spread throughout her body, a silent earthquake of broken promises. Across the desk, Robert Thompson kept his gaze fixed on an invisible spot on the dark wood. His jaw, once so relaxed, now tightened in a rhythmic spasm, the only crack through which his true emotion escaped. He didn't look at her. He didn't dare. Perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of indifference. For Isabella, the distinction no longer mattered. The result was the same: an abyss. Their love, born under the starry sky of the New Orleans Jazz Fest, between the smell of beignets and the sweet melodies of a brass band, had been reduced to this: a cold room, an impersonal lawyer, and the sound of papers being organized. That love that promised to be forever, sealed with scented letters and stolen kisses behind the food stalls, was now just a legal formality, a statistic. For her, marrying in her early 20s had been the embodiment of a fairy tale. The certainty that pure, simple love was the only necessary foundation. For him, as the years passed, the dream became a golden cage. His friends, with their bachelor lives, last-minute trips, and commitment-free party nights, planted a seed of doubt in Robert's mind. "You haven't lived," they would tell him, and the phrase resonated in his head like a poisonous mantra. He began to yearn for a world he didn't know, a self-discovery that, Toha, in his opinion, was incompatible with the ring on his finger. The warmth of their marriage, once as vibrant as the morning sun in the French Quarter, began to fade. Robert became a ghost in his own house. His body was present, but his mind wandered to distant places, to possibilities that didn't include her. The nights grew longer, the silences heavier. Isabella fought with the tenacity of someone who refuses to see the end. She planned surprise trips to the Gulf Coast, hoping to rekindle the flame on the beaches they once loved. She suggested couples therapy, an idea he dismissed with a wave of his hand, as if it were an admission of failure. She wrote letters, trying to recapture the magic of their youth, but the words that once enchanted him now seemed ineffective. Every attempt was like trying to hold water in her hands. Love was slipping through her fingers, and nothing, absolutely nothing, brought him back to her. And then the inevitable came, not as a storm, but as a fine, persistent drizzle that soaks the soul to the bone: the divorce. Now, in that room, the hum of the air conditioner was the only soundtrack to the end. Inside her leather purse, a secret screamed in silence. Minutes before entering, in the cold, impersonal bathroom of the building, she had torn the pregnancy test into dozens of small pieces. 2 blue lines, clear, unmistakable. A life sentence that she turned into confetti of desperation. A futile, almost insane act, as if destroying the evidence could annihilate the fact. The truth was that a new life was growing inside her, a small seed of the love that was now turning to dust. A truth that could have changed everything, or perhaps, agonizingly, changed nothing. The child she carried, an invisible and unknown being, would never feel the warmth of the nest that was once their parents' love. "Do we need anything else, Ms. Miller?" The formality of the address was like a slap. She was no longer Mrs. Thompson. She was just Isabella Miller, a woman alone. "No," she whispered. Her voice, choked and almost inaudible, with a strength she didn't know she possessed. She stood up. The sound of her heels on the marble floor echoed in the room. Each step a hammer blow, sealing the coffin of her marriage. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she did, she would collapse right there. As she crossed the door, the warm, humid Chicago air hit her. A breath that brought no relief, only a feeling of suffocation. The tears, held back for hours, finally found a way, mixing with the sweat on her face. Her hand, by a primal instinct, flew to her belly, a gesture of protection, of recognition, but she quickly pulled it back, as if touching fire. "Not now. Don't think about that now." A voice cut through her, ripping through the noise of the traffic. "Isabella!" It was his voice, Robert, hoarse, desperate, a sound she hadn't heard in years. Her heart gave a painful leap, a cruel twist. For a second, a fraction of a second, she hesitated. A part of her wanted to turn around, run to him, shout the secret in her purse, beg him to try again. But the other part, the one that now commanded her body, knew it was too late. She closed her eyes, allowing more tears to fall, and then took a deep breath, the air heavy with pollution and regret, and kept walking. Each step was a denial, a choice. The last thing she heard was the sound of his footsteps, stopping abruptly behind her. A silence that confirmed what they both already knew. It was the end, an absolute end, without ellipsis, without the possibility of a new chapter. Little did she know that the story, in fact, was just beginning. The ghost of 6 years. A perfect life, a hollow heart. 6 years. In the grand scheme of the universe, 6 years is less than a blink, cosmic dust. But in a man's life, 6 years can be an eternity, a desert of time filled only with the sand of routine. For Robert Thompson, that was the exact measure of his self-imposed exile. The freedom he had so longed for, that, discovering the world, he used as justification to demolish his marriage, had revealed itself as a monotonous, gray landscape. He woke up every day at 6 in the morning. The sound of his phone's alarm the first note in the repetitive symphony of his existence. The ritual was immutable. The gym where he lifted weights, as if trying to lift the weight of his own choices. A long, hot shower where the water ran, but never washed away the feeling of emptiness. A cup of black coffee. Bitter. Drunk, standing in the kitchen of his luxurious apartment, in a high-end condo in the downtown area. The house, with its designer furniture and panoramic city view, was a silent mausoleum. A silence so profound that sometimes Robert could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of an imaginary clock, the echo of a laugh that no longer existed. He buried himself in work, a renowned architect whose name was synonymous with success. But the bold projects and client praise were only temporary distractions. At the end of the day, returning to the impeccable and empty apartment, the same dull ache awaited him in his chest, a faithful and unwanted companion. That Thursday morning, something in the air felt different, a heavier stillness, a more palpable melancholy. He walked to the kitchen, the black granite countertop reflecting his tired face, his eyes fixed on the digital calendar on the wall, a gift from a satisfied client. The date glowed in a subtle red. September 14th. A knot formed in his throat. It would have been their 10th wedding anniversary. 10 years. He let out a short, humorless laugh, a dry sound that died in the silence of the kitchen. It would have been. 2 words that carried the weight of a decade of lost possibilities, of futures that never happened. The past was a ghost that haunted him at the most inopportune moments, and the future, a long, deserted road. He picked up his mug, the warmth of the porcelain spreading to his fingers, when a firm knock on the door broke the monotony. It wasn't the doorman or the cleaning lady. He wasn't expecting anyone. A feeling of strangeness ran through him as he walked to the entrance. Opening the door, he was met by a delivery man from a logistics company, his brown uniform sweaty under the Chicago sun. "Mr. Robert Thompson?" "That's me," Robert replied, his voice a little hoarse from disuse. The man handed him a tablet for a signature and a large padded envelope of an anonymous color. There was no return address, just his name and address printed on a simple label. A premonition, cold and sharp, ran down his spine. Something in that package, an energy, a warning that what was inside had the power to alter the orbit of his stagnant world. He closed the door, the envelope in his hands feeling as if it weighed a ton. For a moment he considered throwing it away, ignoring it, continuing in his safe and predictable routine. But curiosity, mixed with an inexplicable fear, was stronger. With slightly trembling fingers, he tore the edge of the package. What he found inside made the air escape from his lungs. First, a photograph. Quality photo paper, vibrant colors, a crisp image. In it, a boy, a small boy, about 5 years old, with light brown hair, messy as if he had just woken up from a nap. And the eyes, oh, those eyes. They were a green so intense, so familiar, that Robert's heart skipped a beat. They were Isabella's eyes. But the smile was an even deeper blow. A wide, mischievous grin that formed small dimples in his cheeks. The same smile Isabella gave him on those lazy Sunday mornings, when the world seemed to belong only to them. His whole body froze. Behind the photo was a letter, folded into 3 parts. The paper was simple, but the handwriting. He would recognize that handwriting anywhere in the world. Elegant, flowing, with the I's and F's drawn in a unique way. It was Isabella's handwriting. His hands trembled so much he could barely unfold the paper. The words seemed to dance before his eyes, but he forced his brain to focus, to read, to understand the message that had traveled 6 years to find him. "Robert, I know you may hate me. Maybe you don't even think about me anymore. That would be fair, but there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long, long time ago. The one in the photo is Danny. He is your son. I wanted to tell you. God knows how much I wanted to, but I didn't have the courage. We were so broken, and I convinced myself that you would be better off without me, without us. I thought I was saving you a burden. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I was wrong. But now it's not about me, or you. It's about him. Danny deserves to know who his father is, and I can't carry this secret alone anymore. If you want to meet him, if there's any part of you that wants to find us, we'll be at Lincoln Park this Saturday at noon, near the pond. If you don't show up, I'll understand. I really will. But you should know that one day he's going to ask about you, and I'll have to find a way to explain why his father didn't want to meet him. Isabella. The letter slipped from his fingers, floating slowly to the porcelain tile floor, like a dry leaf falling from a dead tree. Robert's legs gave out. He stumbled backward, his body searching for support until his back hit the cold wall. He slid to the floor, his heart pounding against his ribs like a caged animal. His head was spinning. Disbelief, anger, regret. A giant wave of emotions hit him, drowning him. A son, He ran a hand through his hair, pulling at the strands, desperately trying to make sense of it all. A son. He had a 5-year-old son he never knew about. 6 years. 6 years stolen. 6 years of first steps, first words, birthdays, scraped knees. 6 years he could never get back. Images of that day in the law office flooded his mind. Isabella's devastated look, the way she flinched, how she fled without looking back. The puzzle pieces, once scattered and meaningless, began to fit together with brutal clarity. He should have followed her. He should have demanded answers, fought for her, for them. But his wounded pride and blind anger prevented him from seeing the truth that was right there in her eyes. He bent down, picked up the photograph from the floor. His eyes scanned every detail of the boy's face. There was so much of Isabella in that smile. But now he could see himself, too. In the shape of the chin, the arch of the eyebrows, the way the head tilted slightly to one side. An overwhelming mixture of awe and grief filled him. The clock on the wall read 9:30 in the morning. Saturday was in 2 days. 48 hours to decide the course of the rest of his life. His pulse quickened. Could he do this? Could he face Isabella after all the silence, all the pain? But the thought of losing the chance to meet his son, of letting that child believe his father didn't want him, was unbearable. Fear and pride could not win this time. Not again. Do you think Robert can truly make up for 6 years of lost time? Would you be able to forgive someone who ran away from you? Share your opinion in the comments below. The reunion at Lincoln Park. A new beginning. Saturday dawned in Chicago with a leaden sky. A thick blanket of gray clouds that promised rain that never came. It just hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. It was a perfect reflection of Isabella's state of mind. Sitting on a wooden bench in Lincoln Park, she felt the morning chill seep into her coat, a shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. Her hands were tucked into her pockets, her knuckles white, as she watched Danny a few yards away. With his 5 years of inexhaustible energy, he ran after a soccer ball, his brown hair flapping, his pure, crystalline laughter ripping through the park's stillness. He was a point of light and color in a world that, for Isabella, seemed to have faded to gray. He was the reason for everything, the anchor that kept her sane during the last 6 years of silent exile. But today, his innocence seemed almost cruel, a painful contrast to the anguish gnawing at her chest. She looked at her wristwatch. 11:58. 2 minutes. In 120 seconds, the hope she had been tentatively nurturing for 2 days would either turn into relief or shatter into a million pieces. Her heart beat erratically, a war drum announcing an internal battle. What if he didn't come? The question echoed in her mind, each syllable a blow. Could she bear it? Could she look at Danny later and invent an excuse, another layer of lies to protect his small heart? The truth was, she didn't know. The courage that led her to send that envelope already seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a paralyzing fear. A small hand tugged at the sleeve of her coat, and a soft voice brought her back to reality. "Mommy?" Danny stood beside her, the ball forgotten on the grass. His green eyes, a direct inheritance from her, looked at her with a concern that belied his young age. "Are you okay?" Isabella forced a smile, a movement of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, my love, just thinking." But before she could invent a distraction, a sound broke the tension. The sound of footsteps, not those of someone strolling, but of someone running, hurried, almost desperate, crunching the dry leaves on the path. Her heart, already beating fast, leaped into her throat. She turned her head slowly, afraid of what she would find, or worse, what she wouldn't. And then she saw him. There he was. Robert. Standing a few yards away, his chest heaving with heavy breaths, his hair slightly disheveled by the wind and the run. His eyes, darker and deeper than she remembered, were fixed on hers. In that instant, the world around them disappeared. The noise of traffic on the nearby avenue, the barking of a dog, the buzzing of insects. Everything dissolved into a deafening silence, a universe of unspoken emotions, unasked questions, and unconfessed regrets passed between them in that single, devastating moment. 6 years of silence, pain, and distance condensed into a single look. It was Danny who broke the spell. "Mommy, who is he?" he asked, his childish voice sounding strangely loud in the settled silence. Isabella swallowed hard, a knot in her throat. The tears she had fought so hard to hold back began to well up, blurring her vision. She turned to her son, the center of her universe, and said the words she had rehearsed and dreaded for years. He is your daddy." For Robert, the ground seemed to undulate beneath his feet. The sight before him was so overwhelming that his brain refused to process it completely. Isabella was there, real, tangible. The same eyes that mixed storm and calm, the same mouth he knew so well. But there were new fine lines around her eyes, subtle marks of time, and a weariness he hadn't been there to witness, to alleviate. And beside her, clinging to her sleeve like a small castaway, was the boy from the photo. His son, Danny. The boy looked at him with cautious curiosity, his green eyes identical to his mother's, but with an intensity that was purely his own. My son. Robert's world tilted dangerously. This is real, he thought, the phrase repeating in his mind. He is real. All the emotions he had suppressed for the past 2 days, guilt, anger, regret, and a fragile, terrifying hope, threatened to overflow, tearing him apart inside. He swallowed, his throat painfully dry. With a monumental effort, he took a hesitant step forward, then another, his eyes not leaving the boy's face. "Hello," he managed to say. His voice came out hoarse, broken, a pathetic sound for such a monumental occasion. How could such a small word even begin to build a bridge over such a vast chasm? Isabella's eyes glistened with tears, but she nodded, an almost imperceptible gesture of encouragement. "Danny," she whispered, kneeling beside her son, to be at his level. "This is Robert, your daddy." Danny blinked, his expression unreadable, as he switched his gaze from his mother to the tall, unfamiliar man in front of him. "You're my daddy?" he asked, his voice soft. But the question hit Robert with the force of a physical blow. He could only nod, unable to trust his own voice. "Yes," he finally rasped. "I'm your daddy." Danny studied him for a long moment, his head tilted to one side, a small wrinkle of concentration forming between his eyebrows. The silence stretched, charged with unbearable expectation. Then he asked the question, the inevitable, most simple and devastating question of all. "Why did you never come?" Robert's heart shattered. The weight of that innocent question crushed him. The weight of 6 years of absence, of a lifetime of ignorance. He looked at Isabella, a silent plea for help. But she had her head down, guilt etched into every line of her face. It was up to him to answer. "I didn't know," Robert said, his voice trembling, the words coming out in a whisper full of pain. "I didn't know about you, Danny. If I had known, I swear to you, I would have been here from day one." The boy seemed to ponder this, his childish but surprisingly perceptive eyes examining Robert's face, perhaps looking for a sign of a lie. After a pause that seemed to last an eternity, he nodded slowly, his shoulders relaxing a little. "It's okay," he said. It wasn't a forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. It was a door that hadn't been slammed in his face. Robert let out a shaky sigh, a relief so intense it left him dizzy. He knelt down, getting on Danny's level, trying to find the right words in the whirlwind in his mind. "I really want to get to know you, Danny, if you'll let me." Danny looked at his mother, seeking her approval, her reassurance. Isabella gave him a soft, encouraging smile, pushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "It's okay, my love. You can take your time." Danny nodded again, his small fingers fidgeting with the hem of his jacket. Then he looked at Robert, and a different light shone in his eyes. "Do you want to play catch with me?" The request took Robert completely by surprise. He blinked, and then a small, breathless laugh escaped his lips. Yes, I'd love to." Danny grinned, a genuine, open smile that made Robert's heart swell in a way he never thought possible. The boy picked up the ball and held it out to him. In that simple gesture, in the awkward toss that followed, something new began. Something fragile, uncertain, and unmelt, but with the unmistakable aroma of a new beginning. The catch and the journey home. The afternoon unfolded with the fragile, hesitant beauty of a flower blooming in slow motion. Robert's first clumsy toss of the ball was met with Danny's laughter, a sound so pure and contagious that it dissolved a layer of the ice coating the father's heart. They played. It wasn't a real game with rules or teams, but an impromptu dance of throws, catches, and runs across the damp grass. Robert, who hadn't thrown a ball in years, rediscovered a childlike joy, a lightness he thought he had lost forever. He watched his son, mesmerized. The way he ran, arms slightly outstretched for balance, the concentration on his face as he tried to catch the ball, the triumphant gleam in his eyes with every small success. Every detail was a gift, a piece of a puzzle Robert was desperate to put together. Sitting on the wooden bench, Isabella was a silent observer of the scene. Her heart was a pendulum swinging between happiness and pain. Seeing them together, the father and son, who had never known each other, was the fulfillment of a secret dream she had harbored for 6 years. But every shared laugh between them was also a knife twisting in the wound of her choice, of the stolen time, of the family that could have been. From time to time, Robert's gaze would meet hers over Danny's head. They were glances laden with questions, with silent accusations, and with a deep longing. There was an ocean of unspoken words between them, an abyss of misunderstandings and pain. But for now, he focused on Danny, on the miracle of that present moment. After almost an hour, Danny finally threw himself onto the grass, panting and grinning from ear to ear. "You're not so bad, Dad," he said. And the word Dad, spoken so naturally, sounded like the most sacred music to Robert's ears. "Thanks, champ," he replied, his throat tight. Night crept in, bringing with it the weight of the day. Isabella's apartment was a reflection of her, cozy, organized, with touches of a life Robert knew nothing about. Colorful toys in a corner of the living room, children's drawings taped to the refrigerator with magnets, a soft smell of home that contrasted brutally with the sterile emptiness of his own place. He helped put Danny to bed. The boy, exhausted from the afternoon of emotions, fell asleep almost instantly. Robert watched him sleep, his chest rising and falling with his soft breaths. The perfection of that small being, his son, was overwhelming. The love he felt was so vast it hurt, a pain mixed with the corrosive guilt of the lost years. He adjusted the blanket over his shoulders, a paternal gesture that felt both foreign and perfectly natural. As he left the room, he found Isabella in the living room. She was standing near the window, looking at the city lights, her arms crossed over her chest like a barrier. The silence between them was no longer the silence of the park, filled with a child's laughter. It was a dense, heavy silence, charged with 6 years of untold history. It was Robert who broke it, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You should have told me, Isabella." She didn't turn around. Her shoulders hunched slightly. "I know." Her voice was muffled. "I wanted to. So many times I picked up the phone, typed and deleted messages, but we were so broken. I looked at you, at the chasm between us, and all I could think was that you didn't love me anymore. And if you didn't love me, how could you love a child, an obligation, a chain that would tie you to me forever?" The raw honesty in her words hit him. He approached, stopping a few feet away from her. "You didn't give me the chance to choose. You decided for both of us. I was afraid." She turned abruptly, her green eyes glistening with unshed tears, a mixture of fury and pain. "You have no idea what that was like, Robert. To be alone with that positive test in my hand, to feel the world falling apart, and then to sit in that law office and see you, unable to even look me in the face. For me, that was the final sentence. You had already left long before you signed that paper." The accusation hit him hard, because it was true. He had been angry, hurt, consumed by his own selfishness and the feeling that life was slipping away from him. "But I never, ever stopped loving you, Isabella," he said, his voice choked, the confession escaping before he could contain it. "Not for a single day." A bitter, broken laugh escaped her lips. "Love wasn't enough to save us back then, was it?" "Maybe not," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "But maybe it's enough to start fixing us now. For him." The wounds were open, exposed under the dim light of the room. The pain, the mistakes, the unspoken words. It was all there, pulsing between them. But in the midst of that pain, for the first time, there was also truth. A brutal, but necessary truth. Isabella looked away, tears finally rolling down her face. "I never stopped being afraid," she whispered. "Afraid you'd leave me again. Afraid I wouldn't be enough." He took the last step that separated them, his heart pounding. "I'm scared too. Scared that I've lost everything forever." The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was a silence of contemplation, of possibilities. We can go slowly," Isabella said finally, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "For Danny." Robert looked into her eyes, seeing the woman he fell in love with, and the strong woman she had become. "For Danny," he nodded, and then added, his voice firm with a new determination. "And for us, too." From that day on, a new, fragile routine began to form. Robert became a constant but careful presence. He didn't want to intrude. He didn't want to scare her away. He would show up at school dismissal, and Danny's smile upon seeing him was like a balm for his soul. He helped with homework, discovering a world of letters, numbers, and colorful drawings. He learned that Danny was obsessed with dinosaurs, especially the T-Rex, and that his favorite juice was grape, the purple one. With Danny, the connection blossomed every day. Natural and strong. They built with Legos, watched cartoons, and Robert even learned to do the voice of the villain in bedtime stories. But with Isabella, the ground was still unstable. There was a cautious cordiality, a dance around the wreckage of the past. They talked about Danny's day, about bills and logistics, but rarely about themselves. The walls she had built around her heart were still standing, but Robert noticed, with growing hope, that they no longer seemed so high. He saw small cracks forming, tiny glimpses of the Isabella he loved, in a spontaneous smile, in a prolonged look, in a gesture of concern when he looked tired. And he clung to those moments, to those small victories, like a thirsty man clings to raindrops in the desert. He knew the journey would be long, but for the first time in 6 years, he was no longer lost. He had a map, and the destination was a place called family. The legacy and the journey home. Autumn in Chicago doesn't have the vibrant colors of the North, but it carries its own beauty, a softness in the air, a golden light that seems to bathe the city in nostalgia. It was on an afternoon like that, at the Lincoln Park Autumn Festival, that the fragile tapestry they were weaving gained a new thread, stronger and more colorful. The air was filled with the sweet smell of cotton candy and the salty aroma of popcorn, mixed with the sound of pop music from the speakers and the laughter of dozens of children. Danny, as always, was a dynamo of energy, running ahead, his face illuminated by the sheer joy of existence. Robert walked beside Isabella, his hands in the pockets of his jeans, a posture that tried to look casual, but hid the attention of a man walking on eggshells. They were an almost perfect image of a family, but they both knew the precariousness of that scene, the distance that still existed in the space between them. The sound of dry leaves crunching under their feet was the only dialogue. It was Isabella who spoke first, her voice soft, almost a murmur. "He's so happy." Robert turned his face to her, a small smile touching his lips. "He deserves all the happiness in the world." Their eyes met for an instant, and in that brief contact, a silent truth was shared. Danny's happiness was the common ground, the bridge over the chasm. Suddenly, Danny's voice called to them, full of urgency and emotion. "Mommy, Daddy, come see this!" The word "Daddy" still caused a small jolt in Robert's chest, a wave of warmth and gratitude he doubted would ever disappear. They followed the voice and found Danny standing in front of a makeshift stall where several children were leaning over small tables, concentrating. Brushes, pots of colored paint, and on the tables, dozens of pumpkins of all sizes. Danny took a brush with solemn determination and looked at them, his green eyes shining with an idea. "Let's paint a pumpkin family like us?" The question, so simple and so profound, hung in the air. Robert looked at Isabella with his heart in his throat. He saw in her eyes a reflection of his own emotion, a vulnerability she rarely let him see. A slow, genuine smile bloomed on her lips, breaking the mask of caution. "Of course, my love," she said, her voice slightly choked. They sat on the small wooden stools, one on each side of Danny. Robert chose a tall, slender pumpkin. Isabella chose one with a rounder, more elegant shape. And Danny, with all the care in the world, selected a small, perfectly round one. "Mine is the smallest, because I'm the smallest," he explained with irrefutable logic. They painted in a comfortable silence, broken only by Danny's instructions and their laughter. The outside world, with its complexities and pains, seemed to recede, leaving only that small circle of light and color. Robert's fingers, accustomed to the precision of architectural blueprints, proved surprisingly clumsy with the child's paintbrush. He tried to paint a smile on his pumpkin, but the result was a crooked, comical line that made Danny burst into laughter. "Dad, it's all crooked." In the midst of the laughter, Isabella leaned over and with her thumb wiped a spot of black paint from Robert's cheek. It was a quick touch, almost accidental, but her fingers lingered there for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. His skin was soft, the gesture charged with an ancient intimacy. time stopped. Robert's heart stumbled. He looked at her, and in her eyes he saw not only the mother of his child, but the woman he had never stopped loving. The girl from the village fair, the bride at the altar, the wife he had abandoned. She looked away quickly, her face flushed, but something had changed. An invisible wall had turned to dust. When they finished, the 3 pumpkins stood side by side, a big one, a medium one, and a small one, all with the same crooked, happy smile. "That's us," Danny declared, clapping, his face radiant with pride. "Our family." Robert swallowed hard, his chest tight with an emotion so strong it almost choked him. "Yes, son," he whispered, "that's us." Later that night, the stillness of the apartment was different. Danny was sound asleep, perhaps dreaming of smiling pumpkins. Robert didn't leave as usual. He stayed, wandering around the living room, knowing that tonight was a turning point. Isabella was on the small balcony, looking at the starless sky, darkened by the city's light pollution. He approached in silence, stopping beside her, his shoulder almost touching hers. The night wind brought the smell of rain and wet earth. "Do you still think about that day?" he asked, his voice low, breaking the silence. The day at the office? She didn't need to ask which day he meant. There was only one. She hugged her own body, a gesture of self-protection. "Every day," she confessed. "Every detail. The sound of the pen on the paper, the hum of the air conditioner, the way you didn't look at me." Her confession was a knife in his chest. "I was a coward," he said, his voice hoarse with regret. "I should have gone after you. I should have knocked down your door if I had to. I should have fought." She turned her face to him, her eyes glistening under the faint street light. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "And I shouldn't have run away. I should have screamed, made you listen." Emotion overcame him. Her too. The air between them vibrated with the pain of the past and the fragile possibility of the future. Isabella began, her voice trembling. "Let's try again. For real. Not just for Danny. For us." The question hung between them, laden with the weight of 6 years of separation. She looked at him, her eyes searching for his in the gloom, looking for any sign of doubt, any hesitation. "What if we're wrong again, Robert? What if we hurt each other again? I don't know if I can go through all that one more time." He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. His hands found her face, holding it with a gentleness he didn't know he possessed. His thumbs traced the path of her tears. "We might be wrong. We probably will be. We're human. We're imperfect. But I'd rather be wrong 1,000 times by your side than be right alone. I don't want to spend another day wondering, what if?" A sob escaped her lips, and she leaned into his touch, her forehead resting against his. He wrapped her in his arms, holding her with a strength that said everything words couldn't. It was a hug that begged for forgiveness, that promised protection, that celebrated their reunion. "I missed you so much," she whispered against his chest, her voice broken. "Me too," he replied, his vision blurred by his own tears. "I was lonely for 6 years, even when I was surrounded by people." And there on the balcony of an apartment in Chicago, under a starless sky, they were no longer alone. For the first time in a very, very long time, they were together. They were the future of the family. The embrace on the balcony was not a period, but a comma, a necessary pause before a completely new sentence. From that night on, the air between Robert and Isabella changed. Caution gave way to a rediscovered intimacy, hesitant like a child's first steps, but undeniably real. Robert's nights on the living room sofa were replaced by whispered conversations in the kitchen, long after Danny was asleep, where they no longer spoke of the past with pain, but with the curiosity of archaeologists unearthing an ancient city, trying to understand how the ruins were formed so they could build something new and stronger on top of them. He learned about Isabella's fears as a single mother, the sleepless nights with fevers, the crushing loneliness of Sunday afternoons. She learned about his emptiness, the professional success that never filled the hole in his soul, the belated understanding that the freedom he sought was, in fact, the loneliest of prisons. They were, with infinite delicacy, falling in love again, not with the memory of the other, but with the people 6 years of pain, growth, and solitude had transformed them into. One day, on a typical rainy November afternoon in Chicago, one of those that washes the city's dust and leaves the smell of earth in the air, Danny came running from the small table where he was drawing, his face flushed with excitement. He waved a sheet of paper with a fervor that only a 5-year-old possesses. "Look! Look what I made!" Robert took the drawing. His heart, which he thought had already gotten used to strong emotions, skipped a beat. On the paper, under a rainbow of 7 crooked colors, were 3 stick figures, 1 tall, 1 medium, and 1 small, all holding hands, which made Robert's throat close up. However, it was the words written in shaky, mirrored letters above the figures that got him. "My family." Isabella knelt beside Danny, her eyes shining. "My love, it's beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Danny, puffing out his chest with pride, pointed to the refrigerator. "Can we put it there with the others?" "We can," Robert asked, looking at Isabella, a request for permission that went far beyond taping a drawing to the refrigerator. She smiled, a smile that reached her eyes and lit up her whole face. "Of course we can. That's where it belongs." Together, the 3 of them walked to the kitchen. Robert lifted Danny so he could pin his manifesto up with a sun magnet, and there, among utility bills and reminders, the simple, powerful drawing declared a new truth. My family. It was no longer a maybe, a what if. It was real. The first cold snap of December came as a surprise. A polar front that made Chicagoans pull their coats out of the back of the closet. From the apartment window, they saw the white sky and felt the wind whistle. Danny, who only knew the cold from the air conditioner, was ecstatic. "Is it snowing?" he asked, his nose pressed against the glass. Robert laughed. "No, champ, it's just a little cold." But Danny's question ignited a sparkle in Isabella's eyes. She disappeared for a moment and returned with bags of cotton balls, rolls of tape, and scissors. "If there's no real snow," she announced with a mischievous gleam, "we'll make our own." And so, in the middle of the living room, they embarked on the most unlikely mission, building a snowman out of cotton balls. They rolled cotton balls that came apart. They taped them together. They laughed at the lanky structure that insisted on leaning to one side. Robert lifted Danny onto his shoulders so he could place the head in position. Isabella found an old scarf and a cowboy hat to adorn the creation. The result was a lopsided, strange, and absolutely perfect figure. "We did it!" Danny shouted, dancing around the snowman. Robert watched the scene, his heart overflowing. He looked at Isabella, who had a tuft of cotton stuck in her hair. Her cheeks were flushed from the effort and laughter. In that moment, under the soft afternoon light, she was the most beautiful woman in the world. He approached her, picked the cotton from her hair, and the words came out before he could think, an impulse straight from the soul. "I love you." It wasn't a whisper. It was a declaration. Isabella's eyes widened for a second. Then they filled with an emotion so profound, he felt he could drown in them. "I love you too, Robert," she replied, her voice steady. No hesitation. "I never stopped." It was then that Danny, stopping his dance, looked from one to the other, his head tilted. So now we're a real family? The question hung in the air, simple, direct, demanding a definitive answer. Robert knelt down, face to face with his son. He hugged the boy tightly, burying his face in his sweet-smelling hair. "Yes, son," he said, his voice choked. "We are a family." Isabella joined the hug, wrapping her arms around the two men in her life, her face pressed against Robert's back. She laughed and cried at the same time, and there, on the living room floor, hugging a snowman made of cotton balls, under the gray Chicago sky, they were no longer three broken people trying to fix themselves. They were one. They were a home built not on perfection, but on the ruins of the past, cemented by forgiveness, the courage to try again, and the unconditional love that, after all, was the only thing that really mattered. Comment below if you liked the story, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you soon. All the best.